Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Scott Lucas in Birmingham. He's a professor of international politics at Birmingham University in the UK. Good to speak to you, Scott. So I'm going to tell NATO you've got to start paying your bills, as he said many times. So he's going there for a fight. Why is he so keen on not having any friends at all?
Well, I'm going to say this first and foremost, and that is Donald Trump doesn't want NATO. Donald Trump told other leaders at the G7 summit 2 weeks ago that NATO should go the way of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Area with Canada and Mexico, which he also opposes. That's for a combination of reasons. Part of it's personal, that Trump actually really just believes in himself and this supposed America First approach. He doesn't like the fact he has to deal with other leaders, at least ones who aren't named Vladimir Putin in Russia. But second, it's this mistaken perception that NATO is ripping off the United States. The European Union is ripping off the United States. Donald Trump doesn't even realize that countries don't contribute to like a piggy bank at NATO. They each make individual contributions in their defense forces. But Trump thinks as this supposed businessman, which is either the United States wins or the United States loses. At his own mind, he thinks the United States loses if it has to deal with NATO unless they bow down to him when he appears this week at the summit.
So Donald Tusk said the US should respect its allies, and to Russia and China, the US will not get a better ally than Europe. What do you make of that?
There is an alliance between US institutions and NATO, between the US military and its partners in NATO. There is an alliance between US diplomats and European or NATO counterparts, but there is no alliance between Donald Trump and NATO or with European leaders. Donald Trump, in the past 48 hours, has again insulted European leaders, has just castigated the European Union. Again, I repeat, the one person who he admires as a leader is not America's, quote, allies. It's Vladimir Putin of Russia, and that's the meeting he is looking forward to next Monday in Finland, rather than the NATO summit and rather than his stopover in the UK this weekend.
So he's also ready for a fight in trade relations with the European Union. Looking at his foreign policy in the last year, it's America first. And what impact is that really having on world politics?
Well, I mean, in terms of what Trump is doing domestically is, of course, America first, even if it means America alone is playing to what he thinks is a base that can keep Republicans in Congress and reelect him for a second term. In world politics, it's ripping up the fabric of world politics. It's ripping it up, that supposed order that we established since 1945, through the Cold War, beyond the Cold War. It's ripping up the rules of the game, not only with Europe and not only with NATO, but with a country like Turkey, who, of course, is a NATO ally, but outside the European Union. In other words, Donald Trump doesn't believe in the multilateral approach that has been the bedrock of trying to avoid war and maintain some type of stability. He believes in one-on-one discussions with people who will flatter him. And since NATO won't do that, and since the European Union won't do that, then I'm afraid any question of alliance is off to the side, and we just have to hope that the summit doesn't completely dissolve into an angry walkout by the US president.
And do you expect that to happen, Scott?
I don't think so, because I think NATO leaders saw what happened at the G7. They saw Trump get furious with the Germans, with the French. I think they'll sort of treat him with what we would call kid gloves. I think there'll be very little of substance between Trump and the other leaders at NATO. Instead, the key discussions will be between military delegations behind the scenes. So don't watch Donald Trump to see how this summit goes. Watch the U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis. He's the key person they're relying on.
Well, thank you very much for that insight there, Scott Lucas, and taking your time.